Okay, this video is going to take you through a potential example of how to do the Chapter 2E assignment, Runners1.java. And so we're going to look at that, and we'll discuss a few other options you could have done in fulfilling this assignment, and because you can do this a couple of different ways. And so the first thing to remember is you got to have the import statement for the scanner class. You need to declare the scanner object, and then as we move on here, one of the ways you could have done this is to declare all the variables that are going to store user input. So that this is what this section is here. The other way you could have done it, which we'll show a little bit later. And so let's say we declared all of our variables first. Remember, you don't have to declare all your variables first. You can put them in the program as you need them. The thing I want to discuss here is that we want to make sure that you have work on having shorter names. And so, for instance, we use sib instead of sibling. You have in here, and you might have said num of times run sib1. That would still be good. Here you have tot instead of total. You have my instead of miles. So those are things you can do. The other thing is maybe you used int here instead of double for the total number of miles, and that would be fine because I didn't give specific direction to use doubles, and you could go either way on something of this nature. So you could have used ints for those. And then as we move on, the next section, what you need to do then is make sure that you have asked the user for each piece of data. So the idea was you were supposed to get the user's first name or name, and then the how many times they ran last week, and the total miles that they ran last week. And so it's important that you ask the questions specifically so that the user knows exactly what they need to type and what you're looking for. So you don't want to be ambiguous in your prompts. So these are very important how you write these. In this first one, it says enter your older sibling's first name. So first of all, it does indicate maybe which sibling that for which you want the name. You indicate, do you want the first name or the full name? So that kind of a thing. And then you have the line of code that has to read and store it. So yeah, those two lines are going to go together every time that you ask for user input. And just remember that you could have gone string sib name1 is assigned scan.next line instead of having this line. So you delete this one, the declaration, and you declare it on the same line as you are reading and storing the input. So you can go either way with that. We're using scan.next line because the first name could be more than one word. And as we go on here, we notice that we're asking for the first name of the other sibling. Now, here's the thing. This is important to remember that students are going to do these different ways, and in some situations, neither one is incorrect. Both are correct. So in this situation, the writer of this program here asked for the first name for each of the siblings, and then they went on and asked for the number of times they ran last week, and then they finished with the asking for both siblings and how many miles that they ran last week. Now you might have just taken the older sibling and said, okay, enter the older sibling's first name, and then ask for how many miles or times that this sibling ran, and then how many total miles they ran. And then go to the second sibling and ask for the name and then the times run and the total miles. So either way would work. And so in this particular person is asking for both at the same time. So here we go. We go to the next part, and notice we have a line of code that prints a blank line in the output, and notice down here how that looks for the person running the program. All right, so you have this, you have a blank line, and then you have another section. So this is a good way to separate the sections. And so we're going from asking for first name to how many times run. And so anyways, and so here you've got asking for how many days or times that this that the one sibling. And notice in this particular situation, this programmer, this one of the students, did use this question, use their name that was given up here in this question in the next prompt, which is an excellent idea. It keeps it more personal between the program and the user, and so that's a great idea. You didn't have to do that, but that's what this student did. And notice you want to be, it says how many days did so-and-so run last week. So instead of just saying how many did they run, you get me specific and say how many times did they run last week. And of course, since we're asking for whole days, it only makes sense to have a whole number in this situation. We're going to do a scan.nextInt. This has to match the data type here when the variable was declared. All right, and then we go on to the so we have those two, and then we have another blank line in the output here after asking for how many times they ran, and this one's going to ask for how many total miles they ran. All right, and since now you could have done an int, and you'd want to say then here how many times, how many total miles did so and so run to the nearest whole number, or something of that nature. Here, this is this particular programmer is allowing for decimals, so they make it so all you have to do is and have one decimal place in your response. All right, so we go on, and then the idea was that to use the 3 pieces of information from each user to summarize what they said. And so, of course, remember we use variable calls and strings. And the 3 pieces of information are stored in this variable, and this variable. And so that's how you use the responses by the users, is by the variable calls. Calling the variables that are storing the user input. All right, and so this could have been a number of ways. This was left open to you and how you wanted to do this. The only requirement, besides that it makes sense, is that you have these 3 variable calls in your statement. So that should do it. And again, look at the output. Notice how this programmer did include code for blank lines in the output, so you can see how nice this is. These sections are separated by a blank line and so forth, and I do see one output error, and that's here between did and Billy, and that needs to be fixed. Alright, that's it.